It's almost unbelievable how effortlessly we've learned to pretend our way through life. We walk around acting as if everything is under control, as if nothing shakes us, nothing confuses us, nothing overwhelms us, and nothing ever feels heavier than we can carry. We nod, we smile, we reassure everyone around us that we're fine, even when something inside is quietly fraying at the edges. And the strangest part is that this performance doesn't just happen on the outside. We start performing for ourselves too. We convince ourselves that if we say the right things, keep the right posture, and hold it all together long enough, the truth beneath it will magically resolve itself. But reality doesn't work like that. Reality waits. It doesn't disappear just because we've decided to ignore it. Somewhere along the way, we picked up the idea that admitting struggle is a failure, that showing uncertainty is weakness, and that telling the truth about what we feel is somehow too much. So we bury it. We tuck the truth into the corners of our lives, thinking no one will notice, not realizing that we are the first ones who stop noticing ourselves. We lose touch with the pieces of life that are real, raw, and honest, and replace them with rehearsed lines and acceptable expressions. We think we're protecting our relationships, our image, our stability. But what we're really protecting is the illusion that we're supposed to have everything figured out. And then we wake up one day and realize how disconnected we've become, how automatic everything feels, how heavy it is to keep pretending. We move through routines that no longer serve us, say yes to things that drain us, and stay silent in moments that require courage. We get so used to the performance that the real version of ourselves becomes a stranger we rarely spend time with. And that disconnection doesn't happen in one dramatic moment. It's built quietly through small compromises, small silences, small lies we think won't matter. We create these little worlds where we think we're safe because everything looks orderly and predictable. But beneath that surface is a deeper truth we keep stepping over. The truth that we're tired. The truth that we're yearning for something more honest. The truth that we're craving space to breathe, space to question, space to just be, without the pressure of appearing composed. The truth that pretending is slowly wearing us out. It's overwhelming sometimes to acknowledge how much of our life is shaped by expectations. Family expectations, cultural expectations, social expectations, even the expectations we've invented ourselves. Expectations about who we should be, how we should behave, what we should desire, and how little room we're allowed to have for uncertainty or change. We follow these unspoken rules because breaking them feels uncomfortable and being honest feels risky. But the cost of avoiding reality is much greater than the discomfort of facing it. And if we're being honest, we don't lose touch with reality because we're careless. We lose touch because we're scared. Scared of disappointing others. Scared of being judged. Scared of revealing the parts of ourselves that aren't polished or confident. So we protect ourselves with smiles, with business, with distractions, with shallow conversations, with perfectly timed jokes, with everything that helps us avoid saying, "This is where I'm actually at." But all that protection ends up isolating us from the deeper connection we crave. The thing we forget is that reality, our real, unfiltered reality, is not the enemy. It's not something to avoid or hide from. It's the foundation of every honest step forward. It's the place where clarity grows, where resilience forms, where courage breathes. And when we start letting ourselves acknowledge what's real, without performing, without minimizing, without editing, we begin to see life with fresh, steady eyes. We begin to see ourselves again. Because the moment we stop pretending everything is fine is the moment we finally give ourselves permission to live. There's this moment we all face where the world feels like it's trying to hand us its version of the truth, fully packaged, sealed, and stamped with the words, "Do not question." And yet inside us, there's this tiny voice that keeps poking, nudging, whispering, "Are you sure that's real? Are you sure that's the whole story?" That voice isn't rebellious or dramatic. It's honest. It's the part of us that refuses to sleepwalk through a life someone else designed. And what I've always admired about Carlin is that he reminds us what happens when we actually listen to that voice instead of burying it under routine, obligation, or the comfort of fitting in. Because the truth is, questioning reality doesn't make you cynical. It makes you awake. And being awake is uncomfortable. Sometimes I know. It pushes you to look at things you'd rather ignore. It invites you to abandon assumptions that once made you feel safe. It asks you to step out of the role people expect you to play and instead choose the one that genuinely fits who you are. But when you do that, something powerful happens. You stop accepting life at face value and begin shaping it with intention. And maybe that's why honesty, real honesty, the kind that strips away the glitter, can feel startling. It shakes loose the illusions we cling to, the stories we repeat because they're convenient, the expectations we absorb simply because they're popular. But once those illusions fall away, even if the truth isn't wrapped in comfort, there's a freedom inside it. There's room to breathe. There's room to grow. Think about how often we rush through our days on autopilot, agreeing with things we don't really believe, laughing at jokes that don't land, going along with ideas that don't sit right in our chest. We do it to avoid conflict, to keep the peace, to avoid being labeled as difficult or sensitive or too intense. But Carlin teaches us that honesty isn't about being abrasive. It's about being brave enough to name what's real. It's about refusing to shrink yourself for the sake of someone else's comfort. It's about having the courage to say, that doesn't make sense to me, even when everyone else seems to nod along. So many of the narratives we accept as just the way things are were never meant to serve us. They were meant to keep us in line. They were meant to keep us predictable. But nothing extraordinary comes from predictability. No growth, no awakening, no transformation ever began with someone blindly accepting the script they were handed. It starts when you question, when you observe, when you allow yourself to unlearn. And unlearning isn't a betrayal of who you once were. It's an evolution. It's acknowledging that you are allowed to outgrow old beliefs, outdated identities, and inherited expectations. It's understanding that the world is constantly shifting, and so are you. Carlin had this way of holding up a mirror to society, not to embarrass it, but to expose the cracks we pretend aren't there. Because only when you name the cracks can you decide what needs repairing and what needs rebuilding. There's something deeply empowering about realizing you don't have to accept everything as truth just because it's loud or widely repeated. Your mind is not a container for other people's certainty. It's a landscape meant for exploration. When you question, you reclaim your power. You reclaim your intuition. You reclaim your ability to decide what aligns with your values, your experiences, and your understanding of the world. And maybe that's the real invitation here. To look at life not as something that happens to you, but something you engage with consciously. To notice when something feels off. To pause before agreeing. To dissect ideas before adopting them. To trust your ability to see beyond the performance of truth and into the reality beneath the surface. Because when you stop taking everything at face value, you start living a life that's textured, intentional, and unmistakably yours. You begin to build a relationship with the world that's grounded not in fear or conformity, but in clarity. And that clarity becomes the foundation for a life that isn't just lived, but fully experienced. And at the end of the day, questioning reality doesn't pull you away from life. It pulls you deeper into it. It makes you present. It makes you thoughtful. It makes you honest with yourself in a way that changes everything, quietly at first, and then unmistakably. That's the moment you stop drifting and start choosing. That's the moment you realize that clarity is a form of power. And that's the moment you begin living boldly from the inside out. Here is your 700-word expansion of, as key point 3 is, written in a seamless, motivational speech tone, aligned with the earlier key points, flowing naturally. And to not mentioning Brené Brown by name, just speaking in that style. There's a certain kind of relief that washes over you when you finally let go of the pressure to be perfect. It's subtle at first, almost like taking off shoes that never quite fit, but you wore them anyway because everyone said they looked good. There's this sudden sense of ease, of room, of finally being able to move freely without fear of messing up the image you've spent so long maintaining. And that's what embracing your humanity really feels like. An exhale you didn't even realize you'd been holding. We spend so much of our lives trying to present the polished version of ourselves, the one that seems put together, calm, confident, certain. But the truth is, we're all quietly wrestling with things we don't say out loud. Doubts, insecurities, questions, regrets. All these pieces of us that we tuck away because we're afraid someone might misunderstand or judge or turn away. But hiding them doesn't make them disappear. It just makes us feel more alone inside our own story. And this is where Carlin becomes such an unexpected guide. For all of his sharp edges and fearless honesty, he never hid the messy parts of the human condition. In fact, he dragged them into the spotlight, pointed at them, laughed at them, and in doing so reminded all of us that it's not our flaws that make us weak. It's pretending we don't have any. He made it clear that being human is inherently imperfect, and that's precisely what connects us. Because the moment you stop chasing the illusion of flawlessness, you give yourself permission to show up as you are, not as the edited version, not as the socially approved version, but as the real, breathing, evolving, learning version. And when you do that, something remarkable happens. People around you feel safer to do the same. Vulnerability isn't a performance, it's an invitation. It tells the world, you don't have to pretend with me. And that kind of presence is rare and powerful. We often forget that the things we try hardest to hide are sometimes the very things that make others feel seen. The moment you admit you don't have it all figured out, someone else can finally admit they don't either. The moment you laugh at your own mistakes, someone else finds the courage to forgive themselves for theirs. There's a strange beauty in the way our cracks let the light through for someone else. But embracing your imperfections isn't about celebrating chaos or refusing to grow. It's about acknowledging that growth doesn't happen in straight lines. It's messy and nonlinear and sometimes embarrassingly human. We stumble, we fall, we misjudge, we misunderstand, we try again, and in all of that movement we discover what it means to show up fully. Not perfectly, but fully. And maybe that's the real heart of this, understanding that authenticity isn't about having nothing to hide. It's about choosing not to hide even when you could. It's about owning your story without cutting out the chapters that were hard or confusing or less than graceful. Those chapters matter just as much as the triumphant ones. They shape us, teach us, soften us, and deepen our capacity for empathy. We live in a world that constantly tells us to curate ourselves, to be impressive, to be admirable, to be exceptional. But exceptional doesn't mean flawless. Exceptional means whole. And wholeness comes from acknowledging every part of your humanity, even the parts you once wished away. Think about how much energy goes into maintaining a fat aid. The monitoring, the editing, the overthinking. The constant effort to make sure no one sees the cracks. And then imagine what could happen if you redirected that energy toward actually living, toward connection, toward creativity, toward joy. Letting go of perfection isn't giving up. It's finally beginning. Carlin's humor worked because he didn't pretend to be above the rest of us. He stood on stage and said, "Look, we're all ridiculous sometimes, and somehow that truth made us feel lighter. It made us laugh at ourselves, not with shame, but with recognition. It reminded us that life isn't supposed to be a choreographed performance. It's unpredictable and imperfect and wonderfully human. So when you embrace your own imperfections, you're not lowering your standards. You're raising your honesty. You're saying yes to the kind of life that doesn't require constant self-monitoring or relentless pressure to meet unrealistic expectations. You're choosing authenticity over approval, truth over appearance, connection over performance. And in the end, that choice doesn't just free you. It frees everyone around you. Because when one person stands in their humanity, it gives others permission to stand in theirs. And that kind of courage, quiet and unpolished as it may be, is the first step toward a life lived fully and without apology. And in that choice, you finally become someone real, not perfect, not polished, but deeply, unmistakably human.